Okay, Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
Well, guys, as Glenn Youngkin jumped into the political fray, his old colleagues at private equity giant Carlyle Group, they kind of prepared for the worst. They were waiting for the moment when the company's ghoulish maneuvers and sociopathic ethos would ultimately break into the open. Here's a Bloomberg piece citing that from August. They say former colleagues have been bracing for Youngkin's run to not only spotlight Carlyle's past controversies, akin to what Mitt Romney's presidential run did to Bain Capital, but for it to also dredge up missteps by Youngkin and managers he oversaw. And there was plenty to be concerned about. Carlyle Group first gained notoriety thanks to Michael Moore's documentary, Fahrenheit 9/11. In that documentary, he tracked how they profited off the attack through their extensive ties to Saudi Arabia and their investments in the defense industry. Former President George Bush Sr. happened to be an advisor at the time, putting the Bush family in position to personally profit from our forever wars. And then there's just the generally ghoulish behavior that is the business model of private equity. You may recall John Oliver exposed one aspect of this. Carlyle Group has gotten into the trailer park business, buying up mobile home parks, jacking up rents, and evicting tenants en masse, exploiting the most vulnerable among us for fun and profit. But for some reason, the Virginia governor's race did not include much discussion of the way rapacious vultures like Glenn Youngkin and Carlyle Group look to profit off of war and poverty. Why was that? Well, there was one eensy-weensy little problem. Democratic candidate Terry McAuliffe had himself profited off of Carlyle Group. As friend of the show Matt Stoller put it, quote, "I love that Terry McAuliffe couldn't attack Youngkin's Carlyle Group record because McAuliffe was an investor in a Carlyle fund. Ladies and gentlemen, the Democrats." Indeed. But the corruption and co-opting of the Democratic Party by Wall Street and business interests is not just a problem for the Virginia governor's race. In fact, their capture by business interests has destroyed their ability to deliver for regular people. And I would go so far as to say that it poses an existential threat to the country. Now, let me first say that the GOP is at least as captured as the Democratic Party. They have long been the party of big business, and deciding to occasionally talk about the working class has changed absolutely nothing in that regard. But when the working class really went off a cliff is when the Democratic Party also became captured by big money. Terry McAuliffe was part of this shift with his bestie Bill Clinton. Clinton used populist language to win the presidency, and then he quickly shifted to reorient the party away from labor and towards business. Clinton and his DLC pals, they decided they didn't want to leave all the big money fundraising to the Republicans. And that's, of course, to say nothing of the post-public service corporate gigs. Supreme Court decisions that opened the floodgates of corporate cash continually just made this situation worse. And so now Democrats, unsurprisingly, find themselves unable to deliver on even the most modest of campaign promises thanks to their complete industry capture. Joe Biden, he promised to be the most pro-union president in history. He championed the PRO Act, which would help tilt the balance of power a little bit back towards workers. Oh, would you look at that? Multi-level marketing companies, also known as pyramid schemes, which should by all rights be illegal, they have been funneling money to Kyrsten Sinema to buy her opposition to the PRO Act and make sure it can't pass through reconciliation or through any other method. But of course, the problems are way bigger than just Kyrsten Sinema or Joe Manchin. Joe Biden promised he would lift the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It was really the only thing that he promised Bernie in exchange for Bernie's endorsement. But unfortunately, New Hampshire's 2 Democratic senators, along with a number of other Democrats, have been bought off by the National Restaurant Association, causing them to oppose an extremely popular and badly needed lift to the minimum wage. This steadfast industry opposition has allowed the minimum wage to languish at $7.25, going the longest time in history without a raise. Joe Biden also was reportedly extremely committed to the idea of free community college. He emphasized it even after his election, guaranteeing that it would be included in his Build Back Better agenda. It was a linchpin of his plan to give working-class Americans a shot at the American dream. But the four-year college industry couldn't have community college getting all the glory and, more importantly, having a competitive edge in the market for paying student customers. So they sent out their lobbyists, and lo and behold, Biden's top priority for Build Back Better was no match for their organized money. And finally, there's prescription drug prices. Now, Democrats have literally been promising to have Medicare negotiate prescription drug prices since 2006. Virtually every Democrat, including the worst ones like Kyrsten Sinema, they all campaigned on it. Why? Because it's obvious, it's non-controversial, and it's extremely popular, It's also a very high priority of the American people. But of course, Big Pharma opposed it, and they have won, as they always do. The original reform is out. It's been replaced possibly with a stripped-down, industry-approved version, which will do little to actually save costs or reduce the ability of Big Pharma to steal from the nation's seniors. Now, these failures and obvious corruption, they are an electoral disaster for Democrats, as evidenced by the McAuliffe-Youngkin race. More broadly, when both parties serve a similar set of elite interests on economics, politics just collapses down to culture war. And Republicans have a way better hand to play in culture war issues than Democrats do. There are simply way more non-college educated Americans than there are college-educated Americans. And Republicans have staked out more favorable ground, signaling more effectively to these non-college educated voters. But more importantly, these failures and obvious corruption pose a clear and present danger to the society writ large, most obviously by blocking even the most basic and needed reforms, let alone the more transformational policies that our rigged system desperately calls out for. But by destroying any and all faith in electoral politics as an effective means for change at all, this is an extraordinarily dangerous situation. Because when people lose faith in democratic processes, well, they turn to more desperate measures. What does that look like? Well, we know. Looks like reaching for pseudo-strongmen like Trump, or worse. Looks like susceptibility to the type of conspiracy theories that gave us January 6th and significant anti-vax sentiment. After all, when so many parts of the system are actually rigged, it becomes pretty easy to believe in nefarious forces doing nefarious things for power and for money. Looks like nationwide riots sparked by justifiable rage at the casual snuffing out of human life, all in order to attempt to maintain police state order on the American underclass. It looks like nihilism, punctuated by rage, a nation bearing witness to our own dysfunction and decline, a country led by greedy plutocrats who will never stop rigging the system to get a little bit richer, even if it destroys the very nation that made them rich in the first place. And Sagar, it has never been more clear the way that money, they don't have to buy everybody.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.